So you can see that listening really has everything to do with how we communicate. By listening, you'll be able to hear what other people don't. Because when someone is grieving, they don't need a bunch of talk and advice. They really just need somebody to sit there quietly with them. Hello, everyone. I am Crystal McDaniel, and this is The Naked Singer. Today, we're covering our subject for the month of March, which is communication. This week, we discussed listening as being a part of communication. And honestly, I believe that listening is the biggest part of communication, as without listening, we really don't know what to say or how to even formulate our ideas. So, listening is a crucial part to being successful, as every idea starts with information, and that information comes from listening. Whether we're listening to a podcast, or we're listening to a television show, or a newscast, or we're listening to an audiobook, or reading an audiobook, or we're just listening to a speaker, or just generalized conversation, listening is probably the most important part of communication. So I want to talk about that. As singers, when we are listening, we're listening to multiple things. We're listening to lyrics and the words and their meaning. Every composer puts a piece together, and when they put that piece together, they're wanting that piece to tell a story, an emotional story that will touch the audience and get their point across. So listening to the lyrics of a song and to the text of a song is really important so that you can understand what is going on in the world from the perspective of the artist. Also, when we listen to text, especially if we're in musical theater, we're listening for the story arc line that we need to be working on. Songs aren't just songs, songs are stories. And if you take all the notes and music out and we just use it as a monologue, you want to be able to tell a good and interesting story by what you're hearing and what your audience hears from you. So the first place that starts is by listening to that text, those lyrics, and then we break it down as to what the composer was saying through the musical part of it, so that we know that the composer actually had a part of the lyrics. So it's most of the time our music goes hand in hand with the storyline. So it's important to listen to every single note, every chord, every word that a composer puts down in order to be able to deliver a story correctly. Our story should always be interesting. So when someone listens to it, we're giving them an exciting story that they want to connect with. So that comes in with the emotional part of it. When we're on the stage, we're trying to connect with the audience in some real and palpable way. So you want to make sure that you listen first and think about what story that you want to tell, and then make sure that you come from a very honest, free place in being able to do that. And that helps our audience to be able to listen without constraint and really be able to get what we're trying to communicate from the stage. So listening on our part and then listening on their part is highly important when it comes to a performance. When we are getting information in from another person, we're better able to get out of our box and not just sit and think about what we think about it, but think about what others think about it. So then our borders broaden. Our mind's borders broaden, and other synapses happen in our brain to be able to expand the mind and expand the thought process. So it's very important that when we're listening, we don't just conceptualize and intellectualize what we're hearing. We don't just sit there and analyze it and get the points out. We actually connect emotionally to what the person is trying to say. It's very important that we learn to empathize. In our world today, empathy is a really important part of how we can live as human beings. It seems to me that in our time period that we are in the best of times and in the worst of times. In the best of times, we can listen and get more information through the World Wide Web than we have ever been able to have before in any generation. Yet now we are probably the worst listeners than we have ever been in any generation, because there are so many distractions around us, taking our mind thought this way and taking our mind thought that way. And we really need to stop and stay present in the moment, because it doesn't matter what the future is going to do, and it doesn't matter what the past is going to do. It matters what happens now and what we're hearing now. So listening and being present is very, very important in our lives. No other time has been more important than now, to listen to someone's perspective and see where they're coming from, so that we can find a way to live in peace and prosperity with one another. Now is the time to be doing that. I think that listening is a skill that you can cultivate. We can truly cultivate that. It is not a skill that goes stagnant or that ever needs to go stagnant. Sometimes we get stuck in our place and we think, well, this is the right thing to think, and so therefore I'm just going to think that way, and I'm never going to think any other way. But we actually can expand our borders on that, and we actually can cultivate a different way of thinking if we will just listen and hone that skill. I think it's one of the most important ways that we have as people to show love and respect to another person, to listen. I know that I have a couple people in my life that I use as real touchstones to tell me what the pulse is of the people from where they are coming from, because they have other cultures and other ways of thinking. And I always ask them questions so that I can expand my mind and understand more of where that part of our culture is coming from, whether it be people from the LGBTQIA community, or people from the African American community, or the Asian community. It doesn't really matter what community I work out of, although I do have a few very close friends that are in those particular communities. And I really want to understand what the culture of that community is thinking. So I ask a lot of questions to them, and I work to get the explanation so that I can understand. And I really try to listen hard and grow my listening skills and hone those skills so that I can understand another person's perspective. My perspective is not going to be the only one, and it's definitely not the most important one. And I have learned that to be true, because so many people have so many different ideas, and I want to grow as a person and understand. Now, that doesn't mean that I always agree with that point of view, but that does mean that I do listen and try to remain open-minded to that, because I know that not everyone has the same train of thought or comes from the same background, or even were taught the same things. And I think that it's important that we understand where each other is coming from, so that we can keep an open line of communication and grow more in that area. Listening is the key to knowing what others want. Everyone wants to be important, and everyone wants to be heard. And that is something that we need to ingrain within ourselves, that each person wants to be important, and each person wants to know that they have been heard. And the key to that, and to finding out what they really want and what they really need, is to listen. And that has nothing to do with what I want or what you want. It has to do with what they want, because our job here on this planet is to serve one another. We weren't sit down here to just stand our ground and scream about our own point of views. We were sent down here to actually help, support, live in relationship, love one another, and to serve one another. That is what our purpose is. And we can't serve one another unless we understand what the other person wants. And then understand that that has nothing to do with what we want. But how can we help them gain what they want? And then that actually help us get what we want in the process. I have found as a business owner that when I help others succeed, I succeed as well. And I think that's a mindset that you have to have, is when you help others get what they want, you're going to ultimately get what you want too. Because when we actually serve the other person, we actually end up serving ourselves. Our businesses grow. Our mindset grows. We become a more trustworthy, open person when we help another person succeed and get what they want. That's the ultimate goal and the way that we should live our lives, and we're going to get along better if we are able to do that, and we're going to grow, and we're going to show more love and appreciation for other people when we're more open to finding out what it is that they need and that they want, and to be able to lift them up and encourage them in that. It's the little things like this that make a huge difference for us. That's a mindset that we have to start walking on. Years ago, people lived this way much more than we do. Like the handwritten thank you note was a big deal. Sending those messages and having them hand delivered back and forth, that was a really big deal. And we've sort of lost a sense of that. Yes, you can send text messages, and yes, you can send emails, but sometimes just that handwritten note or that card sent in the mail gives us that little extra effort from that person and lets us know that they are listening and they are hearing and they generally care to go out of their way to be able to do those things for us. And I think we've got to think about those little details more often than not, because that actually communicates that we were listening. We recognize what's going on, and we want to honor them and let them know that we think that they're important. Listening in many, many ways is like planning. It pays off, and it will save you from making a whole lot of mistakes. If you don't hear what somebody else says, then you're going to end up making a lot of mistakes. I know that my husband and I are constantly going back and forth on this type of situation, because living in a household with somebody with ADHD, their brain works really fast, and they listen and they tend to miss a lot of details. And it sounds like I'm picking on him a little bit, but I'm just giving you example of how I can say, honey, I need you to go to the store and get salt and pepper. And he will come home with pepper. And I'll say, but I said salt and pepper. And he'll go, well, I only heard the pepper part. Because what ended up happening is that he heard on the way home, and then he heard the last word pepper, but his brain got distracted on something else. And so therefore he left off the word salt. Now, I'm just using this as an example, but I think many times when we're communicating with one another and we're listening, we don't listen all the way. And we don't repeat back to the person what we think we heard them say to ensure that we really heard them. And I think that's highly important because, I know if I use the salt and pepper example again, I know that if my husband said back to me, so what I heard you saying was on the way home, you want me to stop at the store and get salt and pepper. I would say yes, and then I would feel so good about the fact that he took the time to slow down enough and not get distracted and heard every word that I said. And then if he went even a step further and wrote it down, I would probably be the happiest wife on the planet. Now, I'm laughing about that because sometimes he does that and sometimes he doesn't. But at the same time, I know that if he does do that, I feel so loved by that one little bitty active part that he takes in making sure that he heard every single detail. And so when we're planning, it pays off and helps you to avoid a lot of mistakes. Because if he gets home with the pepper and not the salt, and I needed the salt for something in that I was cooking or whatever, it's just going to cost him more time to go to the store and pick up the salt, because then he has to take 2 trips and rather than one. And I don't know about you, but with the gas prices nowadays, I would prefer him only making 1 trip rather than 2, to make it a little bit more economical for all of us, and it's a better use of time. We can improve on our effectiveness and our efficiency in our organization when we really listen. So when we're listening, we can actually sit down and organize and prioritize, so that we know what was important to the other person, but also what is important to us, so that we can make sure that we prioritize the things that need to be prioritized, and we can help ourselves be important, and we also can help serve the other person and help them feel important. And then all the way around, we end up hitting the target and the goal that helps us all feel the best and work at the most optimum level that we actually can. If you're really listening, you're going to hear what other people don't hear. You're going to hear the real truths that are going on that a lot of people want to dismiss and just sort of ignore and brush under the rug. Maybe the loneliness a person is feeling, you will hear or pick up on that by really listening. Or maybe the fact that they don't need all that advice if they're grieving. I heard a quote that Ruth Graham said a few years ago before her own death. She said, "Grief is death." And I thought that that was so poignant. And let them know that they're listening, they care, and nobody has to say a word. They can just be present. And I find that to be so effective when we decide that we don't really have anything to say. We're just truly going to listen and hear that other person's heart. And it gives us the eyes to see and the heart ears to hear what other people miss. So many times things get swept under the rug and they don't need to be. That person that's lonely, or that person that's depressed, or that person that needs that extra help in the classroom, or that person that is that single mom that just needs that hour to be able to be by themselves. Sometimes when we listen, we actually see and hear exactly what the need is that other people miss sometimes. And I think that it's important for us to really stop and take a moment and hear from that other person. And when somebody says to you what they need, or then how about trying to say, "How can I help?" right off the bat. Right off the bat, and genuinely mean, "How can I help?" Because sometimes, people will say things like, "Well, just let me know if you need any help." Well, most of the time, if somebody is going through something and you hear that they're going through something, then yes, they need help. And maybe they don't know how to verbalize it yet. So just saying, "How can I help?" Or just thinking about something you can do, like, "Can I come mop your floor?" Or, "Can I come vacuum or wash your dishes?" Or, "Do you have anyone to mow your lawn?" Sometimes those things are the most important things to a single mom, or a widow, or a widower, or, just anyone out there that may have a need. Sometimes it's just as simple as letting someone make eye contact with you and then smiling and telling them, "I really like your jacket," or "Your hair looks pretty today," or "You have beautiful eyes." Sometimes, you can listen just by watching their body language. and see what it is that they need. So I think that all of these things are so very important, that we become better listeners and better observers of one another. Successful people are good listeners because they understand how input from their environment can be critical and crucial to the central strategy of what they do. So, successful people mainly know that listening is the most important thing that they can do. As a business owner, I have to listen to my students and where they're coming from and what they need and what their struggles are. I spend a lot of my job listening to my students. And when I say listening, I'm not just talking about listening to them sing, but I listen to them. I work hard at listening to them and their struggle and their fears and their dreams and the things they love and the things they're concerned about, because all those things affect their voice and how they feel about putting their voice out in the world. And if I'm not listening, then I'm not going to be successful, because the very first thing that I need to do always is listen. If my job is about helping a singer sing, then I better be good at listening to that same singer at the same time. As a teacher, as a human being, and as a person that cares about the people that she works for and that she works with. And so I think that's probably the number one thing that I try to do, is I try to listen. Okay, so I think as I'm tying this up, what I want you to do and to think about and to practice is being more aware of what's going on around you and what's going on with the people around you. Some things that I try to practice is when I'm on social media, especially, I try to practice contacting people. The quickest way that I do that is by seeing their stories and what's going on with them at the time. Like if I'm on Facebook, I'll look at the Facebook stories, or I will look at the Instagram stories, and I make sure to comment to them about something that I see, or if they're doing something on Facebook, I try to add to the comments something supportive, so that I'm actually looking and listening and seeing what people are doing in their lives. I find that to be really important, so that people know that I care. Others know that I want them to know that I care and that I want to show up in the best way that I can. I wish I could show up in person and could clone myself for every single person out there. And since I can't, I find that if I just try to do 5 or 6 a day and send a note of encouragement, or send a quick sentence that says, thank you so much for your support. Or if I send a quick sentence that says, I am praying for you, or I prayed for you right now. Because if I comment done, that means I just prayed for you. I stopped in that very second right then and I prayed for you. Sometimes I just want to send a compliment about how well someone is doing, but I try to pick 5 or 6 or 7 people a day and to do that for, so that they know that I know that they're there and I know they're important and that I am listening to them. And I think that that's probably some of the best habits that we can have in our lives. And to make sure that if somebody is really trying to talk to you, that you look up and that you make that eye contact and you genuinely listen to what they have to say. So that's what I have to say on listening today. Remember that the podcast drops tomorrow, and you can find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Alexa, and you can find it on YouTube. If you search YouTube, you search Crystal, capital Crystal, and then put a space and go The Naked Singer, and make sure you capitalize the T in the the N in naked and the S in singer, and make it all one word. So those are the things that you can find me on. Make sure that you go to Instagram and follow the Naked Singer blog. You can find it at Naked Singer blog on Instagram. I would love to have you follow us there because I'm always posting different interesting things and tips from right here at the Naked Singer. I enjoy talking with you today. I hope you got some good ideas on listening, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week. I'm hoping to have some guests coming up soon in the month of April and May. And until then, I am Crystal McDaniel, and this is The Naked Singer.